Whether at home or work, life is about relationships. Welcome to Small Change, Big Dividends with your host, Branch Isole. Small Change, Big Dividends shares steps, tools, and tips for personal career and spiritual growth. So please welcome the host of Small Change, Big Dividends, Branch Isole.
Everyone alive takes their first breaths and first steps in Life 101. In Life 101, we all experience life's 12 lessons. We all experience similar relationship actions and responses. We all experience stress, struggle, and conflict. We all experience suffering, pain, and loss. We all experience physical elements and ailments between birth and death. And we all experience a thirst for truth and a hunger for love. So what's missing? What's missing in Life 101 that's available in Life 101A? What's missing is an understanding and acceptance of the missing link. In Life 101, our path is blurred by a veil obscuring this missing link, so we won't clearly see what our future might be. This veil is described in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 14, which says, "The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolishness and cannot understand them because they are discerned only through the Spirit." This is God's catch-22. It's succinctly revealed again in John 8:47, which states, "You can come to God if you belong to God, but you can't belong to God unless you can hear God, and you won't hear God if you don't belong to God." In Life 101, this veil is firmly in place while our spiritual cognition is held at bay by religions, most often, that try to force feed God to those in their audiences. Perhaps this is why many fall away from religions, be it church, temple, mosque, or polytheism, because people in the pews and audiences are told you can only come to God if you go through us and our clerics. But when the veil is pulled back, the missing link becomes known, and we start to see unhindered. Coming to you from deep in the forest, near the banks of the Ouachita River, you're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole, and you are my featured guest. Small Changes, Big Dividends is a show where your questions are part of the program. So if you have a question, email it to my website, branchisole.com. And thanks for joining me today. Each week, I share Mana'o with listeners from around the world. On Small Changes, Big Dividends, we talk about personal, career, and spiritual Christianity essentials for growth-filled living. Today, I'm going to share some small changes that can pay big dividends in your relationships and in your life. Because whether at home or work, life is about relationships. But it's healthy relationships that encourage and embrace growth. We've now reached our 10th episode, and I'd like to thank you. It's an honor and a privilege every week to share Mana'o with listeners around the world. In our first series, Building Healthier Relationships, we reflectively looked in by seeing out. In our second series, Powers Within, we discovered the powers of thought, choice and consequence, and truth. In our last two episodes, we looked at spiritual growth. Today, we're going to pull back the veil that came with each of us when we were born into Life 101. We'll start today's show by answering several questions that have been emailed to us. Our first question is, what is the missing link? The missing link is an active awareness of moral and ethical responses. When this veil is pulled back, the missing link reveals the options we have in every question, every choice, every decision in our Life 101 experience. With the veil removed, truth is revealed in our life, in our relationships, and in ourself. This recognition reveals opportunities we now have to transfer our new awareness to our impending behaviors, responses, and actions. We can now opt for moral and ethical responses instead of being firmly entrenched in the grasp of what's in it for me with every choice or decision. So, what are morals and ethics? Morals and ethics are God's character and nature in action. What are God's character and nature? Truth and love. Where does awareness of moral and ethics come from? It comes from a knowledge and wisdom gained by starting a spiritual relationship with God. How do we get this moral or ethical guidance? We get moral and ethical guidance by activating our inactive spirit to its full cognition. What's an inactive spirit? It's the spirit we came into this world with. But why is it inactive? It's inactive because it's only partially operational. It's 20% spiritually directed and 80% world responsive. Where does our inactive spirit come from? Our inactive spirit is our spirit of origination. It's who we are in our spiritual essence. Why is it inactive? Because, again, it operates in a vacuum. It's missing 80% of its potential. What does an inactive spirit do? It responds only to right and wrong, or reward and punishment situations, questions, and scenarios. Why do we embrace right and wrong? Well, by default, it's what we know, what we learn, and what we use in our daily life. Right or wrong is the operational response process we understand from our earliest stages of behavioral cognition. About age 2, we start to realize that the concept of right and wrong is most often expressed in the actions of reward or punishment. So our automatic and natural response to every question, every choice, every decision we encounter in Life 101 is rooted in reward or punishment. We are constantly facing this ever-present question. In this situation, what's in it for me? A reward or punishment? I'd like to thank the listeners who sent in those questions from our last episodes. Starting next week, we will begin our 4th series about the end times and last days events that are on our horizon. This new series will present information that most people know nothing about or very little about. And yet, the end times and last days events described in Bible prophecy are popular subjects for Hollywood. And you've probably seen more than one movie with an end of the world storyline. Our new series will be a topic filled with information for everyone listening. And yet, most people are oblivious to any connection this may have for them, either now or in the future. I'll guarantee you won't hear this topic explained very often, and you certainly won't hear about the connectivity of how or why these coming events that are being revealed in our daily lives are associated with coming events in our future. Our new series will be about prophetic events, those in the future that we can recognize today if we know the links and the connections. While we are being forewarned, those familiar with prophecy will be able to identify the looming events by recognizing their precursors being revealed in our news every day. If you've ever wondered about or wanted to know about the rapture, the Antichrist, the second coming of Christ, here's your opportunity. We'll be discussing these and other events predestined to happen in our future. And starting today, we'll touch on those very first steps. But after that, we'll spend a month more depth in coming episodes of this new series, Bible Prophecy, Real, Myth, or Conspiracy. We're going to break for our first commercial. When we return, we'll be looking at the past to better understand today and tomorrow. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole, and we'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
It was almost instant, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical. Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Welcome back. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. How great is God's love for you? He created the universe and provided for all that's in it, including you. God loves all he's created, or he wouldn't have created it. And God's love for you is so great, his intent is to share with you how the future will unfold, so you and your family may be prepared by recognizing events taking place now before our very eyes. Today, to help set the stage for this series of events, I want to share a brief connect the dots historical background. And why is this important? This brief timeline recap will show how the past and present relate directly to coming future events of prophecy. The war in Gaza we are currently witnessing is one of these prophetic events. It's described in Psalms 83, verses 1 through 8. Since the beginning of time, for humans and for their biological predecessors, it was only natural that groups and tribes were in awe of the powers of nature that they contended with in their daily lives. From the earliest times of our human collective experience, people attributed the forces of nature and the natural elements around them with different labels through which mythology took root and developed. The easiest way to attribute identification of forces more powerful than mankind was to give these same elements names which could then be descriptively used and referred to as gods. As they gathered together for survival, groups, tribes, and collections of people embraced mythological tales filled with these powerful and purposeful gods, which were passed down through each generation for education and life applications. As a result, people practiced polytheistic worship, or belief and worship of many gods. The lightning and fertility gods, for example, had different names and identities because they had different powers within different areas of life. Attributing different named gods for different natural or unexplained forces people encountered and gave succor to in their lives provided a purpose for polytheistic believing peoples. 4,000 years ago, out of the Mid-East polytheistic world came a nomadic herdsman named Abram. He was living in southern Iraq, and God approached him and told him to go to another land. Because Abram had come to know of God, he abandoned many of the polytheistic gods of his day as he continued to commune and grow in his relationship with God. As his spiritual awareness and connectivity with the Lord grew and deepened, his life was changed and materially blessed. God subsequently instructed Abram to leave Iraq and go to Canaan, a land that God told Abram he would inherit for his continued single God or monotheistic faith and belief. This land of Canaan would eventually become known as Palestine. As is custom in Mid-East families, the firstborn son is always the first in line to inherit all his father's possessions when the father dies. Abram's wife, Sarai, could not have children, so she instructed her handmaid, named Hagar, to become pregnant with Abram so he would have a son to inherit all his wealth. At that time, nomadic herdsmen like Abram were known as Hebrews. Abram and Sarai were Hebrews. Hagar, the handmaid, was Egyptian. During Hagar's pregnancy, Sarai became jealous and started to mistreat the pregnant Hagar, so Hagar ran away. But while she was in the desert, an angel of the Lord appeared and told her to return home because the Lord would make her son the father of a great people. Hagar did as she was told and returned, and shortly thereafter gave birth to a son named Ishmael. So Abram now had a son to pass his wealth, possessions, and inheritance on to. 13 years later, Abram had an encounter with a heavenly messenger who explained God's new plans for Abram and Sarai. God made a covenant with Abram, which included new names for him and his wife. He would be called Abraham, and Sarai would be called Sarah. Within a year, Sarah gave birth to a son named Isaac. After Isaac was born, Sarah became jealous that Ishmael, the firstborn, would inherit everything. So she convinced Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away. Now, Ishmael had been the apple of Abraham's eye, but he did as Sarah requested, banishing Hagar and Ishmael. As Hagar and Ishmael languished in the desert, the angel of the Lord came and rescued them. Ishmael would go on to have 12 sons who would each become a patriarch within the Arab world. With Hagar and Ishmael gone, Abraham's full attention was now on his son Isaac. Isaac would grow and have 2 sons of his own, Esau and Jacob. Now, Esau and Jacob were twins, but Esau was the firstborn, so he was to be the claimant to Isaac's wealth through inheritance. But years later, Esau gave his birthright to his brother Jacob, and Jacob became the presumptive head of household and the inheritor of Abraham's wealth. Now, like Abraham and Isaac before him, Jacob also had an encounter with God, where God told Jacob his new name would be Israel, and that through him a great nation would be born. It came to pass that Israel had 12 sons, just like Ishmael. So every Israeli and Arab battling today and in conflict with each other for the past 4,000 years have a lineage that can be traced back to Abraham as part of their family or clan. The Jews and Israelites have an ancestral linkage back to Abraham through Jacob and Isaac, while those in the Arab world also have an ancestral linkage back to Abraham through Ishmael. So every Israelite and Arab today are descendants of stepbrothers, Ishmael and Isaac, both who had Abraham as their biological father. It's easy to see the importance of this firstborn role in Mideast culture. The land that God promised he would give to Abraham went from the Wadi River in Egypt to the Euphrates River in Iraq and included all of the land of Canaan, where the Canaanites and later the Palestinians lived. Now, if you watch today's news, you'll see the maps that they use to describe the conflict in Gaza. The Wadi is the dividing line in Gaza City that the military for Israel is using to tell the people of Gaza to move south of. So the land of Canaan would become Palestine, and Palestine in May 1948 would become Israel. A little confusing, but think of it this way. With whatever state or region you live in now, if your ancestors lived and occupied that area since antiquity, regardless of its label, Texas, South Carolina, New Mexico, California, wherever you might live, you would probably consider it your homeland. Arabs living in Canaan were Canaanites. When Abram arrived, as well as when his Hebrew descendants left Canaan for Egypt, the Canaanites were there before, during, and after. And even though the land would later become known as Palestine, These descendants of Canaan and then Palestine to this day still consider that land to be theirs. The Jews claimed the land as theirs, as bequeathed by God to their patriarch Abraham 4,000 years ago. So the Canaanite land inhabited by Palestinians, Hebrews, Israelis, and Jews living in Canaan would become Palestine, and then in May 1948 would become Israel. The land of Palestine was given to the Jews and renamed Israel in a single day by a decree in the United Nations spearheaded by England and the US. So you can see between the birthright question, the lineage inheritance beliefs, and the land promised to the Jews, the same land occupied and claimed by the Palestinians as a homeland, we are currently witnessing a Mid-East struggle that's been going on for 4,000 years, as Israelites and Jews and Palestinians all claim the same ownership of the same land. We're going to pause for our second break. When we return, we're going to talk about the awareness of these complexities for all of us today. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole. We'll be right back.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet every Monday at noon Eastern on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom on the BBM Global Network, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Have you ever wondered why some children recover from their symptoms of autism while others never seem to get any better? After 13 years of research, Karen Thomas has recovered her own son from his symptoms of autism naturally. She now shares how she did it with you in her free webinar so that you can have the right resources and knowledge to help your child. The definition of recovery is to regain health. Karen offers this to you in 4 stages: healing the gut, natural heavy metal detoxification, balancing the co-infections of autism, brain support, and repair. Register now for this free webinar to help you know what you can do to help your child to sleep better, be more calm, improve focus, and reach their fullest potential to live a happy, healthy life. Go to naturallyrecoveringautism.com/free workshop, empowering parents with the resources to naturally recover autism from a mom who's done it.
Welcome back. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. We're trying to better understand the current Mideast crisis and how it relates to the past and the present, but more importantly, how it will play into our future with all these events that are part of God's end times and last day plans for humanity. Israel's Arab neighbors have been supportive of the Palestinians since 1948. However, none of these nations were then or since been willing to take in Palestinian refugees before, during, or after the May 1948 decree that established the State of Israel. Rightful ownership of this area as a homeland has been disputed so extensively that the current Mideast crisis in Gaza is basically a 4,000-year-old repetition of struggle between cousins, descendants of Abraham through Israel and descendants of Abraham through Ishmael. The Jews claim this land, called Israel, as given to them by God. The Palestinians claim this same land as theirs by thousands of years of occupation. And the UN, through influence from Western nations, recognized Israel as a state with the stroke of a pen on May 14, 1948, and has been entreating the entire world to accept the same ever since. Arab nations recognize the right of Palestinians to live in their ancestral lands, while at the same time adamantly discouraging Palestinians from immigrating to their countries. Now, why is all this important to us, as well as to those in the immediate region? Because all of these events point to or pretend prophesied coming events of our future, not only for those living in this regional tinderbox, but also for the rest of the world as well. God has a plan for humanity through Gaza, through Jerusalem, and through the mountains of Israel. But he also has a plan for each of us to have an opportunity to come to know him and to understand this plan for spiritual reconciliation. As the end times and last day prophetic events continue to play out as foretold and promised, we are all warned of the cataclysmic events which will envelop the Palestinian and Jewish people, and through them, Jerusalem, and through Jerusalem, the entire world. Part of this plan is to offer every living soul information to understand how to know God and how to come closer to him as one of his children. Part of this plan is to also share information about a line he has drawn in the sand, a line giving humanity time to understand how and why a relationship with him is the purpose of life. This line in the sand that divides believers and non-believers is drawing nigh and coming into clearer view. To make our awareness keen enough that we might recognize this line and this plan, God has provided prophecy and prophetic insight we should all be looking for to realize this line that's been drawn for us is now becoming visible. But what is prophecy? How many prophecies are you familiar with? What does the word prophecy mean for you and your family? And why is prophecy so difficult to understand? These are just a few of the questions we'll be answering in the shows ahead as we begin our new series, Bible Prophecy, End Times and Last Days, Real, Myth, or Conspiracy. We'll be sharing content you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because prophecy and prophetic events are a topic few people know about, more often few want to know about. Why is this? Prophecy is a topic that can be frightening and upsetting because prophecy is about the end times and last days. This is a subject most people shy away from because few really want to think about or know about death and destruction, particularly if it affects or involves us or our families. For our discussion, let's put those thoughts aside and think of prophecy as a time machine, allowing us to know the future. Now, if you've ever read a time machine story or seen a time machine movie, You know that when the hero or heroine makes a small change in the future, it ripples back, causing entirely new consequences in the present. The same is true for us. If we know or become familiar with prophecy, knowing what the future holds will give us new insight to the events unfolding in our present. By changing your present knowledge, you can alter your future response to those that will help happen again. This is why prophecy and its events are important to you and your family. When you know the future, you can prepare and help to identify the adversities happening today that will help you address or avoid the trauma of future events. Now, few may realize or know what's ahead on the horizon, but know this: the focus of everything we'll be sharing and talking about over the next few weeks can be summed up in a single statement. The totality of our End Times and Last Day series content is to remove fear and apprehension of these prophetic future coming events by assuring you that with this knowledge, you can be recipient of God's promise. Now, what is this promise? To provide a path of spiritual reconciliation so you and your family can be with Him after this mortal life has ended through belief in Jesus of Nazareth as the Christ and the Messiah. If you don't know how to step foot on this spiritual path, I invite you to go back and listen to our previous episode, number 8, where we share 5 easy steps to acquire spiritual grounding. Now, beginning next week, as we move to prepare for this most important subject matter content for billions of people worldwide, but particularly for our listeners, you'll be surprised to hear that the end times have already started, and we are in them right now. Did you know that week 69 of Israel's 70 weeks prophesied for Israel's existence have already happened, and that we are right now waiting on the 70th week to start? If you'd like to know how to identify that 70th week and when it will start, stay tuned. Did you realize that 2 of the 4 big precursor events described in prophecy that the whole world will witness before the coming of the Antichrist have already happened? If you'd like to know ahead of time what they are and what will happen, now you can. You'll be able to prepare yourself and your family for the immediate future and the cataclysmic future on our horizon. Starting next week, we'll spend 1 month discussing the topic very seldom covered in the media. You won't find it covered in mainstream media. You won't find it in the fringe media or even on podcasts. In our next series, we'll be talking about end times and last days, the who, what, where, when, and whys of biblical prophecy. Now, is prophecy a warning or a promise? And if so, for whom? Believers, non-believers, anyone, everyone, no one? Is prophecy real, myth, or conspiracy? And what exactly is prophecy, and why don't more people know about it? If you've seen movies about the end times, the last days, the Antichrist, the mark of the beast, the rapture, the second coming, you know what I'm referring to. If you're totally unfamiliar with these terms and labels and the events that they describe, you'll definitely want to be part of our audience over the next few weeks. If you have an interest in knowing what these events are, how, when, and why they'll be happening, join me on Small Changes, Big Dividends as we start this month-long series. We're going to take our last break. When we come back, we'll wrap up with some words from Christ himself about the end times. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole. We'll be right back.
According to the American Nurses Association, there are approximately 3.5 to 4 million nurses in the United States. So where do all these nurses work? What kind of roles do they have? What kind of education and training help to prepare them for so many different settings? What kind of impact do nurses have on patient outcomes? The World Health Organization has announced that 2020 will be the Year of the Nurse, honoring the 200th birth anniversary of Florence Nightingale. An international initiative called Nursing Now is underway to raise the profile of nursing. The National Academy of Medicine has convened a committee to create the Future of Nursing 2020 to 2030 that will focus on how the nursing profession can create a culture of health, reduce health disparities, and improve the health and well-being of the U.S. population. Learn more and join Joyce Batchelor on All About Nursing, Wednesdays from 7 to 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on the BBM Global Network. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. The end times and last days, are they promises? Are they warnings? Are they real, myth, or conspiracy? In our age of technology, it's often difficult to believe what we see and what we hear. And as we move closer to AI, the things that we see and hear are going to be questionable as to what is true and what is just fabrication. This will be particularly important as the end times and last day events unfold in our very lives, because the media coverage of these events will have lots of opportunity for spin from everyone on the spectrum, believers, non-believers, and doubters. So how can we know what's true and what's not true? Well, let's hear what Jesus himself had to say about the end times in Matthew 24. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end will still come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Do these words strike a chord with you? Knowing that these words and admonishments are happening right now in our news. You can watch the news every day and still not believe the connection between what we see happening all over our world and what prophecy tells us will happen in the future. With these few words from Christ himself, he is setting the stage for his second coming. We are in the birth pains before his second coming. his rebirth and presence on this earth to begin his millennial kingdom reign. In Matthew 24, he is forewarning us in these descriptive sentences of the lead up to and precursor events we will see and experience as part of the end times. The end times will be quickly followed by the last days just before his return, and we will be covering all of these events and timetables starting next week. The times we're living in right now are these birth pains Jesus is describing. The path of the world is speeding down towards its end as we know it. It sounds pretty crazy, right? Probably, unless you know the links between the prophecies and the events. You are unknowingly witnessing today in our very news cycles, plus the ones that will be specifically told of to occur in our future that will come out of the precursor events like the war in Gaza that we see in the news every day. So join me next week as we start our 6-week series, Prophecy, Real, Myth, or Conspiracy. Thanks for joining me today. On Small Changes, Big Dividends, we discuss personal, career, and spiritual Christianity essentials for growth-filled living. If you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please share it with them. If today's show has been helpful to you, please give us a rating and review. And to know more about my work, I invite you to visit my website, branchesole.com, or my YouTube channel, Branch Isole. Today's show has been sponsored by Crystal Creek Farm. If you have a business, a product, or service you'd like to share with the world on Small Changes, Big Dividends, send your inquiry to the website. You've been listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole. Until next week, all the best.
This has been Small Change, Big Dividends. When you're ready for healthier, more successful relationships at home or work, Small Change, Big Dividends is your show. Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.